thriving and surviving with us today. Intertwined is a project of prevention services under the Office of the Dean of Students. Born from the need for an intentional space to share and receive vulnerability in the art of storytelling, we recognize that an essential aspect to creating a healthier campus environment is a sense of connection. Especially now, hearing and seeing each other in our human experiences is so incredibly important and ultimately leads to a greater sense of belonging. When we can come together and support and with empathy for one another, we are ultimately creating a norm of a supportive community and inherently preventing further harm.
I'm going to read you a little quote from this very beautiful book called Between the Listening and the Telling: How Stories Can Save Us. Storytelling is the most intimate form of communication. It is a way of inviting the listener to enter into what we have known, what we have suffered, what we have overcome. When we listen well to another's story, it blooms within the body, creating an intimate connection between teller and listener. Our heart races, eyes well with tears, the belly shakes with laughter. And when we share something we have lived, a joy or a suffering from our own lives, the listener is invited into our very being, to see what we have seen, hear what we have heard, touch and feel what we have known. In this way, storytelling is a sacred transaction. And so tonight, you are all the listeners in this transaction. And what we're going to be doing is spending a little bit of time honing our listening skills. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually invite you to find a partner, maybe somebody you don't know yet, and you're going to share a story of a connection that you have. It could be with a plant or an animal. It's about 60 seconds, something short, just a connection that you have, and the person listening is going to listen very carefully, and then after you're done sharing, they're going to share back what they heard. So, and then we'll switch. So I invite you to find someone that you might not know very well to engage.
Do you want to go first, sharing a story, or do you want to go second? It's a short story of connection. Let me see, what do I want to talk about? I felt deeply connected to my first pet. It was a snake that I found in a country. And I brought him back. I don't know what it happened. But we call it Morris. Morris the snake. And Morris was not happy in our apartment. Morris went down the radiator to the first floor apartment. Very scared. And we had to take our brother Morris. We felt deeply and bring Morris back to the wild. So I still, 50 years ago, that's my story. Feels like a minute.
So now have the listener reflect back what you heard.
Do you have any thoughts about my story that you want to share?
And then the second teller can share.
Now I can tell you a story for you. You guys got deeply connected, and even though you're living in different spaces, you're still kind of connected.
And now the second listener will reflect back what they heard.
Now I reflect to you what I heard, which was you established a great relationship with someone, and despite the fact that you're
Alrighty, finish up your thoughts and let's come back together. Alrighty. Thank you all for participating and practicing with us. We would like to make a note that our stories tonight do include some topics that can elicit trauma responses in those who have experienced them, including but not limited to mental health struggles, grief, and death by suicide. We encourage you to lean into this space with curiosity and compassion while also taking really good care of yourselves. Our storytellers are courageously sharing their stories with you, and so we invite you to lean into any discomfort in order to grow the sense of connection.
We do have a John Davies from the Center for Community Counseling and the University Counseling Center is here, and he is available to talk if anyone has something they want to share or need for an ear. John's around. Okay, great. I also want to thank the University Theater for having us here in their space. We will have a 15-minute intermission and enjoy the show.
Picture this. You're 6 years old. It is a hot summer's day and you have taken an adventure to the pool. You find yourself sitting underwater and it is still and quiet. You can almost hear the world around you, but not quite. It is muffled and you are at peace. Can you feel it? Suddenly, your parent is yanking you out from under the water and you can hear and feel everything. Children screaming while shaking the bars of the water slide. The hot sun is beating into your skin. You smell way too much chlorine and your swimsuit is all kinds of wrong on your body. In contrast to your underwater bliss, it is overwhelming. Sit with that overwhelm for a minute. That is how I felt when I put my hearing aids in for the first time in 5th grade. The first night I had my hearing aids, my family and I went out to celebrate what was supposed to be a new and exciting step in my life. I ended up just sobbing in Red Robin because my previously quiet, muffled, peaceful world blew up. I could hear so much silverware hitting the tables, conversations everywhere, and apparently ceiling fans. Those make sound. What was supposed to be a gift of hearing was actually just my worst nightmare. See, when a person is born hearing, you often naturally have the ability to make sense of auditory chaos. But when a person who is born deaf or hard of hearing, and whose world is naturally quiet, gets hearing aids, you don't have that natural ability to make sense of all of the noise around you, and it is exhausting to constantly be focusing in on making sense of it. It takes a long time to adjust, and although I've had hearing aids for years now, I still feel like crying if it gets too loud in Red Robin. In that moment in 5th grade, I learned that I apparently wasn't hearing, but I didn't think that I could say that I was deaf either. I assumed if you could hear anything, it disqualified you from being deaf. But calling myself hearing didn't make any sense. I can't hear conversations in crowded spaces, and without my hearing aids, I can't hear birds chirp in the morning. My world is one where ceiling fans don't make sound, and I can't hear it if you call my name from across the room and forget knowing the difference between ship, chip, and sip. But I can hear things like fire alarms or church bells ringing, babies crying. This experience of being able to hear some things, but never enough to fully participate in the world around me, left me unable to figure out where I fit. Not hearing, and not knowing if it was bad enough to call myself deaf. That's what I felt like my story was for a long time. Constantly trying to figure out where I belonged, searching for a space and an identity that I could call rightfully mine, but always coming up short. I don't know how to emphasize how confusing that was. I didn't know how to name my experience, and I couldn't make sense of any of it. All I knew was that I felt isolated from the hearing world around me, and I felt alone. It wasn't until I got to UO that I learned about deaf culture. A lot of people don't know that there is an entire beautiful deaf culture and community that is built on shared stories and shared history with deaf artists, deaf universities, a shared sense of humor, and a beautiful language. When I learned about it, I was amazed but deeply conflicted as to whether or not it was something I could call my own. How could I be a part of deaf culture if I still didn't know if I was technically deaf or not? I remember the moment it all clicked. About a year and a half ago, mid-COVID, I was sitting in the middle of my bed watching a video for my ASL class in which people of all different hearing levels were signing deaf enough. A light bulb clicked. That applied to me. There's no one definition of what it means to be deaf. To be deaf is to not be hearing. There is no test to pass or bar to jump over, or anything that you have to prove. Deaf culture is my culture, and it's my connection to this culture that turned out to be my saving grace. There are people who understand my experience. I belong. There's a misconception that being deaf greatly takes away from your ability to experience the fullness of life. In reality, it just changes it. As I'm progressively losing my hearing, I have gained more than I will ever lose. This is called deaf gain. Being deaf is not a loss. It is gaining access to a unique perspective, a rich community, and a beautiful culture. I love being deaf. It's not without its challenges, but in spite of them, I have fought to understand my deaf identity, and it is something that I now celebrate. Deafness is something that should be celebrated. I hope that you'll celebrate it with me.
How do I start this? Let me start off telling you a little something about magpies. They're these beautiful offshoots of crows that swoop in and kill newborn babies from neighboring birds. Y'all ain't even phased? Well, they're smart. I remember one summer day, it was so beautiful, it was so hot too that even the trees were sweating. I was chilling there in my sister's bed. I was quietly disturbed by my parents. Aiden, look outside. Look out the window. So I look out the window and I see my little baby Ash, my little kitty. She's sitting there between two tall trees, tail tucked, looking up, with three magpies triangulating her. They're all squawking at her. They're all screaming at her, saying, "Hey, buddy, you new in town? Well, that ain't gonna play around nicely for your information. Yeah, we're not gonna let you waltz in here without a proper introduction. Yeah, see, we're the Magpie Brothers, and this is our territory. Yeah, so don't you even dare try to squawk. I think they're mad at Ash. So I open up the window, I let her in. And that was the day that she learned you couldn't go killing chipmunks without a talking to from the higher ups. But man, we learned so much from that little cat. Just by watching the way that she observed, we knew we had to do the same. Around this time, I was living up in a picker's cabin, just across the gravel road from where my family was staying at, up the hill past Marie's house. There's something so unforgettable about that smell. Salty cardboard, and sweaty cardboard. I mean, it's salt weathered and definitely cat-lived. So naturally, I'd pop out of bed and swivel my feet into my cheatgrass-infested boots and join the wind. And man, those days were so beautiful. I knew that all of the other animals would be out sunbathing in its glory. So I went out to my secret spot. Crouched behind the edge of a hill, with careful intentions towards my silence, I step on all the moss, on all the rocks. And I take a deep breath before raising my head above the edge of this hill, holding in my excitement to see these little marmots. They're like these rodents that look like beavers, but they were never meant to touch the water. An afro and two peepers pop up. All the tails are the last things I get a glimpse of. Yalla, quick! I chuckle it off like every other time and hop on over to where my family was staying. Give my mama a hug, say what's up to my pops, and go on inside my little sister's room. She's all, what took you so long? But man, those days, interacting with the marmots and spending time with my family, it always made me feel like I was part of such a bigger family. I even felt this connection with the hills out there, in fact. Fashioned so finely with those straight line fields that accentuated their curves in the sexiest ways. They were home to some truly tightly knit social inner workings. We had learned that we were in a system much larger than us. You had to understand who the Magpie brothers were, and the marmots and their strength in numbers, even the sagebrush and its wind resistance. We had to appreciate the orchards and the farm workers that picked them. We had to listen to the spirit of Cowiche and the land that voiced it. We couldn't simply live there without acknowledging their role. But out here in Eugene, man, I'm breaking a sweat searching for the connection I lived with out in Cowiche. I feel like a freaking magician out here because all of my efforts can turn humans into marmots, scurrying away from it. But I look back on Ash and see how she created those connections with other animals. She wasn't placing effort where she didn't have to. And now, she's a teenager. She's out doing her own little thing. She's taught me all she could. And now it's up to me. I have to relinquish my stubborn search for these connections and simply let them make themselves. But if I'm being honest, I really don't know what to do. But I'm gonna have fun finding out.
Stopped on October 4th at 10 p.m. The world carried on while I stayed, my life interrupted, breath stolen. On the other side of the world, the person I drew my strength and courage from drew his last breath. I wasn't there to hold his hand. I wasn't there for his kisses. I wasn't there to hug him and shoulder the weight he carried. I wasn't there. I was all alone in an empty building, striving to finish school and earn my degree, struggling to find my footing, desperately holding the pieces shattering inside of me. An echo of all that once was, an echo of a goodbye. I made my grandpa cry when I was 14 years old. I'm sitting in the back seat of my dad's car, between my grandparents, and I tell him how proud I am of him for serving his country, for raising 3 headstrong daughters, for instilling values and morals in me. The silence is thick and stilling. I'm only 2 years younger than he was when he ran away from home to go serve his country. It blows my mind he was tasked with such high responsibilities on such young, tender shoulders. He reaches out and takes my hand and turns to look out the window. He probably feels uncomfortable and doesn't want anyone to see him battle his inner self, but I saw how he discreetly wiped his eyes, and that made him the strongest person in the world to me. His father was the last person he had made proud. His father taught him to work hard and to live off the land. He knew his father loved him and supported him no matter what. He felt invincible and unstoppable at 16 and carried that strong determination and self-assurance his whole life. I never met my great-grandpa, but the lineage that connects us makes me feel like I've known him my whole life. Through my grandpa's kind eyes and brave heart, through my mom's lovely smile and determined soul, through the voice in my heart when I'm at my lowest, and especially when our sweet tooth takes over rational thinking, I feel the surge of our connection. I remember when I was 4, counting fireflies on a warm summer evening. Just as the sun is losing heat, a breeze is carrying the early scent of petrichor. The air is heavy with jasmine flowers in full bloom, mixed with the burning wick and incense from my grandma's evening prayers. My grandpa's booming laughter cuts through as he holds up the water hose to give me rainbows, right as the last rays of the sun is winking through the canopy. I've seen my grandpa cry exactly 3 times in my life. The second time was when I realized that the strongest person I knew wasn't strong enough to get by. He's hooked up to machines while I stand on the other side of the glass. It takes everything in him to raise his hand and give me a wave. That tiny little wave shatters me and puts me back together in a heartbeat. While I'm choking on my tears, I see his tears soak up the pillow. That wave was just for me to know he's okay and still hanging on, stubborn as ever to let anything bring him down. 5 years later, I saw him for the last time when I flew back home because his health wasn't what it used to be. I stayed by his side the entire 2 weeks, and we celebrated 4 birthdays together. He cried for the 3rd and last time, just as I was leaving. His favorite radio was playing an evergreen in the background, and he smelled like sunshine, clove, and Old Spice. He took my hands and placed them near his face, next to the mole he told me would blast off if I ever touched it for more than 5 seconds. His eyes twinkled with good mischief. He said, "Poof!" We laughed through our tears as he held my hands and kissed them, oh so gently. He knew and accepted the shifting tides. His eyes were telling me the truth. My heart vehemently objected. His hands held me tight to share all that strength and wisdom he had, while I held on to sunshine, clove, and Old Spice. My life was forever altered on October 4th at 10 p.m. I hope I can share with my own little ones of how we are extraordinarily connected through love that transcends time. We will meet again in another lifetime, where our hearts will continue to blaze with laughter and adventure. Here's to you, Matisha.
Prvo, moraš da pomešaš meso, pinač i začin. I stvarno moraš da ga mesiš, kao hleb da praviš. Ruke će ti biti hladne, ali će se sve isplatiti. First, you have to make the stuffing. A mixture of meat, rice, and spices. And you really have to mix it, kneading it almost like dough. Your hands will be freezing, but it'll be worth it. I had just won a marbles match, and I was ecstatic. My 7-year-old self had won a mammoth, one of the biggest sizes of marbles from the older kids. He, unfortunately, was not so happy. Enraged and humiliated by his defeat, he shoveled. My marble struck oblivious self to the ground before I could even notice. My mom did notice, though, just arriving from home to come pick me up. As I spat dried dirt from the ground, I heard him tug, "Bam!" I looked to see my mom storming across the field. I saw the poor boy tremble as my mama seized him by the collar, looked him dead in the eyes, and with a steel, quiet, cold voice commanded, "Never do that again." With those 4 words, she scared the poor boy so bad, I don't think I ever saw him in that park again. Drugo, sada imaš punjenje, moraš da ga pomešaš u kiseli kupus. I moraš da budeš jako pažljiv i kao da ga staviš u krevet. Onda, kad si spreman, možeš da ga zaroliš I staviš u tepsiju. Second, it is now time to wrap the stuffing. You want to lay a leaf of pickled cabbage flat and spoon some filling on top. Then you want to gently roll the cabbage. It's very delicate, so you want to almost put the filling into bed. Once you're done, you should have something that looks like a cabbage burrito. I carried the plate of eggs upstairs with some bread and sour cream. As I opened the door, I saw my mom notice my arrival and smile. As she ate the breakfast that I made for her, I saw her eyes slowly start to light up. Once she was finished, I took the plate and slowly tucked her back into bed. Today was not a good day for her. We were living in Serbia, a brutally patriarchal country, and when my mom finally got the courage to leave my abusive father, she lost everything and everyone, going into a deep depression. Thus, 7-year-old me was thrust into the responsibilities of an adult. As I tucked her in, though, and saw her slowly go back to sleep, I felt no remorse, regret, anger, none, just pain, seeing my mama like that, and hope that she would get better. Sad si napravio sadno. Moraš staviš u tepsiju I možeš da staviš dimljeno meso između. Onda stavi u revno I završio si. Finally, it's time to put the sarma in the pan. It's simple. You put a layer of cabbage rolls on the bottom, and then a layer of smoked in between. A layer of smoked meat in between. Once the pan is filled up, you gotta put it in the oven, and after a couple of hours, it'll be ready to eat. As I drove past what felt like the 2,000th Nevadan bush, I couldn't be helped but astounded by the giant size of the United States. I was traveling from Portland, Oregon, all the way down to Arizona to visit my mom for the first time since I left for college. I drove through what felt like 15 countries by European standards, walled with gorgeous mountains on either side with nothing but desert in between to keep me company. As I drove, I couldn't help but notice the stark differences between the land of my youth and my older life. The familiar, densely packed cities of Serbia replaced with giant boulevards and sprawling parking malls of Phoenix. The tall, towering trees replaced by 15-foot cacti. It was a completely strange and foreign land. And yet, as I walked up the steps leading to her apartment, as I saw her beaming eyes and beautiful smile, all the foreignness melted away. We laughed and hugged, catching up in Serbian, and the more we spoke, the more I felt the connection to my country of birth rekindle. It had been 3 months since I last saw her, by far the longest time we've been separated. I remember making Ivar with her, a mouth-watering red pepper spread. Tasting it for the first time brought back Serbia for both of us. You should have seen the look on my face when she made me burek. Dozens of thin layers of dough with cheese and meat in between. The crispy, crunchy outside, the cheesy, meaty, doughy middle. It was heaven. And then, towards the end of my stay, my mom made a giant batch of sarma for me. We ate it straight for 2 days, nothing but it, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I savored every single bite. Through our food, my mom and I reminded ourselves of where we came from and what we've been through. Our country, our language, our food, our past. A gold thread between us, forever reinforcing our connection. Volite mama, jako volite mama.
Brain is peculiar. I mean, we often think of the mind as independent of the body, but in the end, the mind is mired in the physiology of the brain. Is the connection between two humans essentially then a connection between two minds? If so, what does one mind owe another? What is the culpability of one human to another? These are my thoughts as I reflect back on the day that I had my last conversation with a brain-dead, fully paralyzed colleague back in 2018. When I first walked into the room that day and saw his emaciated body on the bed, my heart sank. I mean, he was looking much worse than I had expected him to look. He was looking like he had back in 2015, when all of this began. So my mind flashed back to that first week of this ordeal. The doctor looked me straight in the eye and said, "He will die by tomorrow. And if by some miracle he doesn't, he would wish he did." I remember trying to find a wall to lean on. But for some reason, the hospital hallway felt too wide, as if I was too far away from any surface that could support me, including, for some reason, the floor. I looked back at the end of the hallway, past the doors of the ICU, to my wife and others who were waiting. What would I say to them? I couldn't possibly be the messenger for, let alone the carer for, a brain-dead colleague. In December 2015, one of my close colleagues at the college I taught in was in a fatal bike accident. He didn't die at site. He did, however, suffer severe head trauma and was admitted to a local hospital by bystanders. What ensued over the following days, weeks and months was an endless barrage of care shifts, food deliveries, doctor's appointments, fund management for a close group of his colleagues, while he went from intensive care to regular ward and eventually to a care home, from where 2 years later he was never to return. I snapped back to reality, and as I was walking over to him, I saw a sparkle of recognition in his eyes. I mean, the nurse had said that lately he'd been expressing himself through eyes and facial gestures. I was ecstatic. This is like progress. This is real progress. Seriously, you gotta know, Shantanu Lodh was a brilliant art teacher and one of the wackiest characters I've ever known. He was always going on and on about Korean lumbar support mattresses, astrophysics and Mondrian. Extremely well-read, when with a penchant for intellectual conversation, he would always hang out with us, the architecture faculty, and make fun of us for our obsession with drawing and technical precision. His mind was beautiful. And this latest development meant that he could come back. All our efforts at saving him were worth it. "Do you recognize me?" I asked him. He blinked once, which meant yes. "Is my name Manas?" "Yes." "Are they taking care of you at the care home?" "Yes." "Are they nice to you?" "Yes." How bad is the pain?" "Oh, I mean, is the pain very bad?" "Yes." "What? Where is it?" "No, I mean, is it everywhere?" "Yes." "Have you been feeling it this whole time?" "Yes." "Wait, do you remember everything?" "Yes." "The accident, the hospital?" "Yes." "How is this possible? We were told he has no brain function and barely any cognition." No. Suddenly I was thrown back into the same hallway from 2 years ago. An endless barrage of memories, all the decisions we had taken for him, a flood of flashbacks. On day 1, we decided to shift him to another hospital with the best neurosurgeons in town so that he could survive the night. On day 2, when the doctors asked us if there was family that he had which we could contact, who could decide whether to pull him off life support. Despite not being able to contact his ex-wife, despite not having access to his funds, we decided that we will not pull the plug. On day 15, we got him a private nurse and a private room so that he could be protected from secondary infections. On day 60, when the hospital kicked him out, we got him into a specialized care home for neurotraumatic patients so that he could have the best chance of actual recovery. So so many decisions, and all for him. And then I asked him the only question I could think of. So are you saying we should have let you die? He blinked once.
We will now have a short intermission, but before we do that, I would like us collectively, on the count of 3, to take a big deep breath in and let out any noises, sounds, stuff stuck inside. 1, 2, 3. All right, we will now play some music, and I encourage all of us to get up, to move around, to dance, to grab some food, and we will join back here in around 15 minutes for Act 2. Thank you.
There's a really big step right there. Anisha. Hi. Oh, thank you for coming. Yes, it's so meaningful for me. I need to hear something like that. And I'm probably, I don't know if you even remember me or not.
Oh my god, how are you kidding me? Oh my gosh, I was just asking about you to Mona today.
I'm so proud of you. And I mean, like, I'm just throwing back to memories that I'm working with you the first day where, you know, like in the teaching class.
I know.
And I was just like, I'm glad I was working.
The boss is me too. I'm so grateful that I know you.
Yeah. So let's.
9 months, and I burned out. Surprise. I was 22, and it felt like a fuse had blown out inside of me. But that is not what this version of the story is about. This version is about joy. I just need you to know where I'm coming from. I quit in the summer of 2021 and I moved to Eugene to go to grad school, but I couldn't go to grad school. I was not in a healthy place, so I had to do something else. Saw a Craigslist ad to be a carpenter's apprentice, and for 4 months I sanded wood. One sunny day I got to ride my bike home. And then at the end of September, I remembered a story of a friend of a friend who had ridden their bike from Seattle to San Francisco, and I decided that I was going to do that. It took me 10 days for me to have this thought, quit my job, pick up my last paycheck, buy used gear at the gear exchange, put my shitty bike on a train, and stand in Seattle, ready to ride 2,000 miles by myself. And it took 2 days for me to pop a tire and realize that I didn't know how to change it. Luckily, Ray was there. Ray was another late season bike tourer who I met in Elma, Washington. Ray changed my tire and I followed him around like a lost puppy dog. Ray was this ex-accountant from Pasadena, California, who had made all of his money in Bitcoin in 2021. So he quit his job to travel the coast on his carbon road bike. Ray told me stories about his mother's cooking in the Korean restaurant that he grew up in, how his sister used to torment him, and how he knew that aliens were tracking him the way that scientists track orcas. Ray was my odd, paranormal belief, finance bro, fairy godmother. The best part about Ray is when I would cry, when I would stand on the side of these highways with miles of uphill left and open mouth, weep like a child out of frustration and fear and exhaustion. He would simply put his hand on my shoulder and wait. And I would get back on the bike, and I would get those miles of downhill with a view of the ocean and the wind whipping the tears off of my face, and I would be happy again. Ray helped me get this undiluted tonic of self-confidence that I had never experienced before, and it helped me keep riding my bike through storms and many more flats. I made it only 1,100 miles south of Seattle, just past the Redwoods to Leggett County, California, where I stopped my trip due to record-breaking, at the time, atmospheric rivers. Call it climate change, call it God. Whatever you want to call an inevitable end, I was done, and Ray was not, so I watched him pedal through the puddles away from me. We connected only for a moment. Two strangers sleeping 15 feet apart for 3 weeks and biking hundreds of miles as if we had a bungee cord between us. And when that connection was severed, I had still been slingshot the 1,000 miles that I needed between me and what I experienced in the pandemic. Couldn't have done that alone. This is what I walked away with. The road has hills, and those hills will tear at my guts and overwhelm me and exhaust my will to keep going. And I will enlist the help of whoever is around to love, even Bitcoin fairies. And I will get through it, because on the other side is joy. Laughing and sobbing and quietly sitting in my tent as I listen to the rainfall. Joy. I can feel pleasure in a world that burned a hole through me. My story is about joy. We didn't start that way, but we got there.
Oregon, even 6 months when we first moved to Independence. I was 11 years old, and despite me wholeheartedly rejecting our move from Arizona, I quickly found a sense of home and connection in the least likely of places. Our local laundromat. Ugh, how I love that place. Every Sunday, my family and I would spend our time at that little 24-hour hole in the wall. I can still remember the giant corkboard at the entrance. It seemed to fall apart a little more with every tack, but there was always something new. The floor tiles, well, they were old and yellow and missing a couple chunks in the corners. The back door, it creaked on flimsy hinges, and if you pushed it too hard, got a little stuck. But hey, all the washers worked great. Well, except for the one in the far back corner. It whined and it squeaked, but that only happened on the spin cycle, so I'd say it was okay. Then, there were the people of the laundromat. Some came in with their headphones on and adamantly spoke to no one. They always got their laundry done the fastest. Then there were the people who talked way too much. There was always the guy who was short a quarter, and luckily always an elderly woman who seemed to have an endless supply of quarters in her coin purse. Sometimes in the hours that my family and I would do our laundry, I'd push my sister around in those little closed carts that are very clearly labeled, "Not for people." But we didn't care about the looks people gave us. We were having fun. One night, I'd even learned how to unicycle outside the building. Now, most nights weren't so exciting, and I spent most of them curled in the corner reading a book or doing my homework, but there was always something about that place that made me feel so warm and safe. I can still remember the first time that I realized that I had a community. My mom and I had decided that we could run to the store before our laundry was done. Now, this is a classic example of what you shouldn't do. We knew that. You're supposed to be there to time your laundry, that way you can switch it on time and be sure to hold no one up. But we were so gonna be the exception. Spoiler alert! We were not the exception. On our drive back from the store, the car began to rumble. It was sort of like when you went too far over the side of the road, except we were going straight down the middle of the lane. And then it began to wobble and clunk and make every other concerning and annoying noise it possibly could. So when my mom finally pulled over, there was a flat tire. But despite the flat tire, the only thing on our minds was our laundry waiting in the wash. If we ever made it back there, we'd have to deal with soggy clothes or hope that they were even still there. Needless to say, there were some tears. Now, if you've ever changed a tire, you know it can be just a little trickier than they teach you in driver's ed. At least it was for my mom, and our only friend around to help was you two. So it took a long time, a lot of frustration, and a lot of rewinding. But eventually, the spare was on. Now it was time to face the laundry. That was the actual scary part. When we had made it back to the laundromat, our clothes were gone. The washer they had been in, empty. In fact, all of the washers were empty. So were all the dryers. Nothing was going, and no one was even left in the laundromat. It was worse than soggy clothes. Our clothes had been stolen. That was it. The end. Final straw. I looked up at my mom, and she had that "don't say anything" kind of look. So I didn't point out the obvious. But as we walked out the back door to finally go home, I spotted my hoodie. It was on top of the furthest folding table, on top of a neatly folded pile of clothes. Neither soggy nor stolen. I remember my mom crying once again. And of course at the time I didn't really get why any of this was such a big deal. But now I'm a little older and I have a better grasp on the stresses of life and money, and I can truly appreciate that act of kindness. Someone who had no idea who we even were had taken their time and their energy, even their money, to make sure that we went home with clean clothes. Now they easily could have thrown him into a cart, gone about their day, and let whatever else happen run its course. But they didn't. Thank you.
On September 24th, 2019, my brother Harrison moved into his dorm at the University of Oregon. It was our first time living in the same city since I left our childhood home in New Jersey 6 years before. On a few open afternoons for the next 3 years or so, Hare and I would grab coffee at that Starbucks in the EMU and snag one of those tables outside of the fishbowl. I'd sit there with both hands on my cup, kind of like hunched over like this, and he would be sitting in his chair pushed back from the table so that he had room for his long legs to stretch out. He'd ask me advice on school, relationships, life. I felt like I did something right, that we could be apart for so long, but he still felt comfortable coming to me about anything. On May 3rd, 2022, my brother Harrison stood on stage in Global Scholars Hall for Intertwined, Lost and Found. He told this brilliant story about his odyssey in his car with his best friend Rob from New Jersey to his new home in Oregon. On July 2nd, 2022, my baby brother Harrison took his last breath in his apartment on the corner of 19th and Harris Alley. As a physicist, I thought about how the last of his energy must have escaped out the cracks in the doors and windows and then sunk into the earth there, because energy has to be conserved. But there is nothing, no equation, law of physics, anything, that can describe the behavior of the universe and everything in it exactly. As a sister, my worldview completely shattered when I lost my brother to suicide. I mean, how had I not realized what he was going through? I had literally just seen him 2 days before. The thread that I thought connected us snapped. It fell through my fingers and mocked my assumptions. I guess I had become too dependent on the predictive powers of observation and interaction. On October 15th, 2 days before what would have been my brother's 22nd birthday, I started writing some letters to him. November 9th. Hey Hare, I'm actually getting kind of uncomfortable as I apply for these jobs that I know I'm extremely qualified for, prepare for this PhD I know I deserve. It's just, at this point it feels like it doesn't really mean anything because I wasn't doing what needed to be done to keep you here. I know that you loved and admired me. Did you feel connected to me? Do I have any true connections, or am I just shrinking away? What does it even mean to be connected to another human being? November 19th. What does it mean to be known? To be present in somebody's neural pathways when your physical being can no longer be the trigger? Can we be understood? Really? December 14th. How does anybody think I'm actually able to act like a normal human being right now? Oh, because I told them I could? Oh my God, please. Why are there people that are not understanding that this broke my entire understanding of love and human connection? How am I expected to think that anything I say or do actually matters to anybody's life? Why can't I and why shouldn't I just live for myself at this point? And why can't I scream at them to understand? Because I feel like even if I did, they probably wouldn't. Hare, I'm sorry, it's hard to articulate how my entire life changed in 1 second, and then it's taken 5 months for it to smack me in the fucking face. Over the next week or so, I wrote to Hare about a lot of the connections in my life, past, present, future, what they had meant to me, and what I wanted from them. Not what anybody else wanted or expected from me. 5 months into grief, 6 years into graduate school, 27 years into life. I was comforted by the fact that all of our lives are so valuable and worth connecting with, however we connect, for however long. Talking to Hare about all this helped me realize that connections can be temporary, but extremely meaningful. December 24th. Merry Christmas, Hare. I don't think today actually would have been that much different, except more fun because you would have been there. I guess you're missing out on a lot of that because you're not here, but I suppose you're also missing out on a lot of that pain that I will never understand. And do I need to? Can I not accept that there are some diseases and decisions that I will never understand? But this is something that happened, and still my life continues. I am so sorry, truly, that I couldn't do what needed to be done to keep you here living the fulfilling life that you deserve. But here we are. I love you, and I miss you. I hope to see you sometime, a dream, a sign, however you want to pop up for me. The letters have slowed down quite a bit in the last few months, but memories of my brother's life skip across the Great Lakes of mine, sending ripples and churning up what's settled below, sometimes when I least expect it. And maybe that's what connection is. Not a thread, but a wave. Not this structured, breakable thing, but a movement of energy. Undulations through time and space that continue long after the initial contact time has ceased. Interaction and propagation. A week before my brother passed, we took our last family trip to Crater Lake. Hare and I booked it down the Cleetwood Cove Trail, huffing and puffing, talking about school, relationships, life, and we skipped stones when we made it down to the water and waited for Mom to meet us. I was thinking about that memory, and I wrote a poem about it, which I think would make Harrison proud. The skipping stones we find are smooth and asymmetric. They're polished by the wake, buffed to enhance their hue. A lifetime on the shore, neglected instantaneously, we send them gliding across the surface. 1, 2, 3. Ripples from each contact breathe into the fathoms, and the skipping stones sink below our view, tethered to their source, resting once more.
What if every good thing you have ever done, you did for the wrong reasons? What would that make you? I'll admit, it's not a question I expected to run into while staring at a leftover burrito, which I wasn't even going to eat, by the way. My wife had turned to me and asked if I was hungry, and I was not, but it's not my first day, I know what that means. So I went off to the kitchen to scrutinize a burrito and my own intentions, I guess, to see if either of them had gone bad. As for the burrito, I took one look at this naked tortilla lump sitting alone on a plate and thought, gross. Now, I love a good burrito, but by themselves, they can make me wonder, is that food? Should I eat that or wait for it to hatch into a big-ass butterfly? So I decide that I'm gonna just dress the hell out of this thing. Shredded cheese, diced tomatoes, some existential panic on the side, and I can just imagine the glee on my wife's face when I would return to our room to present this vision of melty goodness. She'd be eager to take that first bite. She'd cut into the middle, and she would sink her teeth into the mass of frigid bean slush just hiding in the middle of this otherwise perfect meal. Oh, that was close. But not today, Satan. For I thought it through. There will be no joy-murdering ice ball in my wife's burrito. Not on my watch, for I will microwave the burrito twice. Disaster averted, because I care so goddamn much. And this is where I got into trouble, because in the midst of congratulating myself, my next thought was, I wonder if she'll notice. Probably not. You don't notice the absence of a thing, unless someone points it out to you. So now, in the midst of adding just the perfect amount of cheese, I'm also weighing whether Operation Microwave the Burrito Twice is an achievement significant enough for me to work it into organic conversation. Am I clever or funny enough to find just anything to tell my wife, to show her how lucky she is to have me around? Turns out I am not. Not without it being obvious how much I want credit for this stupid, tiny thing. Instead of thoughtful, everything I think of sounds manipulative and sad, because it is. With that, I put the burrito extravaganza into the microwave for the second time, and shut the door. I caught sight of myself, my own reflection, and I was not happy to see me, because I couldn't figure out if I was happy that I had done this extra nice thing, or sad now that I realized I wasn't going to get credit for it. Who really was all of this for? Okay, quick bit of context. I have severe ADHD, he said, surprising no one. Clue number 1, the story thus far. Clue number 2, reasonable accommodations. And there's also the fact that I have no bio or picture in tonight's program or on the website, which is at least a way for me to illustrate how having ADHD is more than just isolated effects and their consequences. It's also a lifetime of experiencing both. So I forgot to send in my stuff on time, I blew a deadline, there are consequences. Big old blank by my name, stressed out producers. Sorry, by the way. And that's the effect. But standing here, admitting to all of you fine people that I didn't get my shit together on time. Now that is the experience. As an adult, bit of a bummer, but as a kid, that experience is devastating. I could never accomplish with great effort things which seemed so trivial to others. My frustrated parents and teachers would ask me, "What is wrong with you? Are you even trying?" And I never had an answer for that. It's hard to argue when I too was sick of me. If you're desperate for just any positive affirmation, but you annoy just everyone around you, be yourself is some pretty crap advice. Become what others want you to be. That's much more simple and effective. At least, that's how it seemed to me. But no one will love you if you don't love yourself first, they said. Also wrong. Because the thing is, someone will. Many someones. And over the years, many did. I just could never believe them. I would doubt them and test them until I broke them, and they left. Which I would always see as yet more proof of how unlovable I am. I've worked hard at that, but sometimes it's all I can do to just admit there's a chance I might be wrong. The reality of this whole thing is that I'm not sad I did this nice thing because I won't get credit for it. I'm just terrified that if my wife doesn't see it, she'll realize that it's not actually worth the effort that it takes to love me back. But she does. She does love me. And I do believe it. Because I didn't earn it. Yet there it is. It helps me remember that love is not a transaction. That control is an illusion, but trust is a choice. And today is not the same as yesterday. So inside this hurricane of swirling emotions, I'm sitting there and I can hear this alarm going off, and all I can think is, oh God, what now? But it was actually just the microwave. The burrito was done. I took it out, set it in front of me, poked the middle. It was perfect. The operation had been a success. So once again, I am staring at a burrito. But this time, there's no question. I did this for her. Because I realize I'm sitting there smiling like an idiot just because I know how much she's going to enjoy it. And because, in the end, that's all the credit I need.
Tomorrow, I will defend my dissertation in earth sciences. But none of this, not the PhD, not me standing on this stage here tonight, none of it would have ever happened if I had not woken up one June morning in 2014, over 4,000 miles from home, hungover, and naked, in the bed of a stranger I would never see again, slowly realizing that I had just made one of the best decisions of my life. Our eyes had locked across the dimly lit pub as the Irish folk band seemed to play our own personal soundtrack. A devilish smile slid across his lips as he tipped his black fedora towards me. After the show ended, he introduced himself. "I'm Chris," he said, dark eyes glittering. "Now, tell me who you are." Oh my God, I thought, he's even Australian. Soon, we were strolling through the winding streets of Cork, Ireland, buzzing on Jameson whiskey and a sense of chemistry and connection that I had never felt before. He asked me what I did for a living, and when I told him that I was an ICU nurse, he frowned. "That doesn't seem like you," he said. "Is that really what you want to be doing?" No one had ever asked me that before. Feeling suddenly emboldened by his question, I leaned forward and kissed him. "No," I said breathlessly a few seconds later, then added, "Fuck no." Part of me panicked, a voice inside me yelling that I couldn't do this, that I was a good girl, that Jesus did not want me wandering through the wee hours of the morning with this fiendishly handsome Australian dancer, and really did not want me following his beckoning eyes back towards his bunkhouse. I had to decide. Years earlier, I also had to decide. Tomorrow was college decision day, and I had to choose. Would I attend Swanee, the prestigious liberal arts university of my dreams, or the school my parents had chosen, a strict conservative Bible college? It should have been an easy decision. However, this is not what God wants for your life, shouted my mom for what seemed like the 100th time in this months-long battle. If you go to that place, you'll fall away. I know you will. You'll never darken the doors of a church ever again. We just want what's best for you, my dad added. And most importantly, we want what's best for your soul, my mom continued. And that's why we're giving you this decision. You can go to Swanee, but that's the end of us supporting you. From now on, you'll do it all on your own. Something inside of me shattered. Later that night, I slipped quietly outside, carrying my Swanee sweatpants, banner, and freshman packet out to the trash can, where I dumped them in and slammed the lid. Again and again, I had to decide, and again, I had chosen to listen to other voices. When I was absolutely miserable in nursing school, I chose to remain in the program because my professors assured me that this was the perfect career path for a servant-hearted Christian woman like you. I stayed in toxic, abusive relationships because every time I expressed my unhappiness, people were quick to remind me that relationships were supposed to be hard because they required constant submission and selflessness. And I kept going to church long after I left home and graduated from the Bible college, despite the fact that secretly, I had never even believed in God, not even as a little kid. Was the girl who kept shrinking herself to fit into this tiny, cramped box really who I wanted to be? I had to decide. Sometime past 3 in the morning, we drew to a stop next to a drafty old boarding house. Chris's smile flashed beneath the shadow cast by the brim of his hat. "So," he said, "are you coming in? It's your decision, Kellum." My heart pounding in my throat, I stood on the precipice. "Don't you dare," yelled the voice of my family, my teachers, my friends. I took a deep breath. "Hell yeah, I'm coming in," I said, unable to hide my grin as I grabbed his hand. "Now, what was it that you were saying about gin and tonics?" Then I pulled him towards the house and walked into the beginning of the rest of my life, a life that I had chosen.
Thank you all so much for being here and listening so well. We're just going to give a couple of extra special thanks to our creative team and all of our story coaches, Sarah Blanchard, Whitney Donaldson, Alexis Dracotis, Alyssa Liris, Jessica Ruth Baker for story coaching and for the live stream tonight and the Very Little Theater, Drew Terhune, Bryce Mercer for videotaping, Chantel and Rory, and DeLoss especially for the music. And again for all of you for being here tonight. And these are for Rory Godak for pulling out.
Thank you all so incredibly much for being here. It means the world to me, all of us. If you take a look at your program on the front, as we said before, we are dedicating these performances to Harrison Kleiss, and we partnered with the Center for Community Counseling. Please consider making a donation through the QR code. Make a note that it's from Intertwined. And then if you flip your program over, there's another QR code where we will greatly appreciate any feedback, suggestions, appreciations that you have for us. And then we are collecting cash in the lobby, little baskets.
For the Center for Community Counseling.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.